Okay, thank you so much for the introduction to come here, and I'm just start my watch here so I can know when I'm finished. I will talk about some experience from industrial biotech and also a little for the future for the Swedish-African partnership. This picture is a hot spring in Kenya. In the background you can see a lot of flamingos. As a bird watcher, it's a fantastic place to go there. Microbes live at 94 degrees pH 10 approximately, so it's a tough conditions. The Sida-supported activities, BioEarn, BioInnovate and some bilateral programs have been dealing with industrial biotech. And what we can see, there have been programs in enzyme and microbial technology and also in environmental biotech. And some of the projects dealt with upgrading of fish waste, production of polyunsaturated fatty acids, which was quite a success. Biogas from industrial waste, Ivar mentioned the sisal fiber production where 97% is waste when it can be converted into biogas. Enzymes for the leather industry, quite interesting because leather industry is heavily polluting. You can avoid much of the pollution by applying enzymes. And wastewater treatment is certainly quite interesting, besides then production of the leather as such. The biogas from surplus biomass has been a theme for quite a number of people. And this just shows the cycle. You have the agriculture and from society. You do the digestion and you get the biogas. And then, of course, what you do with the biogas, that depends a little. This is just the flow in the anaerobic digestion. The interesting part with biogas is that whatever organic material you have, you can convert it into biogas. If you want to make ethanol, you can't do it very efficiently, at least if you have proteins or nucleic acids. You need to have carbohydrates. But biogas can be produced from anything, which is certainly advantageous. We run cars on biogas here in Sweden, and this is the one that we have been using in the department. It's also interesting that if you produce, earlier one said, how many people can you feed from 1 hectare? Now people ask, how far can you drive if you have 1 hectare? And for biomethane you can drive 67,600 kilometers. But if you make ethanol, you come 22,400 kilometers, and if you take the stillage, you get another 14,000. So it's almost double with regard to biogas, which I think is kind of interesting. We have been running projects with Tanzania, bioenergy carriers from biomass. It was a wild type cassava that is not a food plant, but it has quite a lot of starch. Ethanol and also biogas. And these are quite promising projects that are running. But biomass can be used for many other purposes. It has been mentioned earlier. And I took this deals with the US market 2007. But what you can see is that 67% goes into the transport sector, 7% goes into the chemical products. Value for the transport, 350 billion, while the chemistry and material is 255 billion. More or less same level of size, even though it's only 10% of the material that goes into material. So if you have biomass, of course it's more advantageous to make chemicals and materials, and the waste you can then convert into biogas or other energy. This shows a very nice picture, which I hope you will understand and collect everything. But we have the starting materials here. We break them down to C1, C2, 3, C5, C6, and then we convert it into what people call platform chemicals, a range of some chemicals that industry can use. Then they can convert it in some steps and come out with most of the products you today generate from petrochemistry. So this is kind of the chemistry approach to produce compounds to replace the oil. And the platform chemistry, it is for the industry to build on. And it's relatively simple molecules that can be converted afterwards. I'll give you 2 examples. It's actually 1 example, but it's two different schemes. But you can have waste from traditional farming, waste from industrial processes. Also municipal solid waste can be, and GMO crops, specially designed for industrial biotech, has been mentioned, which I think could be interesting. Algae, which I asked about before, is certainly also a very interesting emerging area. This is what you can do with when you produce biodiesel. You produce 10% weight out of glycerol. You saw the glycerol in Anders' presentation. This glycerol can be converted into a whole range of different useful chemicals. 3-hydroxypropionic acid is one such. And if you look at that 3-hydroxypropionic acid, what you can do from that, you can produce acrylamide, methacrylate, acrylonitrile, and acrylic acid. That means you can start to produce many of the plastics that people are using today. Large quantities, that means it will take a lot of biomass, which is certainly quite interesting. I come back to this hot spring. These organisms living in the hot spring, they produce enzymes that are stable at almost boiling temperature and at high pH. Fantastic catalysts. This comes from one of the lakes in East Africa. All these pelicans were on the water, but in the water were also some feathers floating. I asked one of the students to pick one feather that was more or less dissolved. He looked at me and said, well, that feather is much nicer. I don't care, I said. I want the one that is almost eaten because someone has eaten it. And the guy who was sitting and eating it was Nestorencornia aethiopica. It's an organism that we found, and it produces a very interesting protease that is superior to what people are using in washing powder today. This is far better, and it does not need calcium. Because usually calcium soap, that is kind of a problem. But this, since it operates at high pH, there is no calcium. It binds the calcium extremely firmly. We also, of course, deal with gene technology. You isolate microbes. This picture does not come from Africa, but some of the others. And then we take them in small plates, cultivation in flasks, and then in fermenter. And if the production is not good enough, then of course we clone, and we can even start modifying the enzyme in order to get the better properties. The industrial enzymes could go for food industry, leather industry, for the chemical industry certainly, for cosmetics, and for the conversion of biomass. So you degrade the biomass into compounds which can then later on be utilized for various purposes. So if we go to the environmental biotech, which also has been a topic here, I think this is a very important area. Remediation is certainly very important. Degradation of toxic chemicals and bioenergy, mainly biogas, but there has also, of course, been some other efforts. But when it comes to waste, biogas is by far the most interesting, I think. The largest biotech process is water, treatment of water, wastewater, and also water for consumption. And heavy metals, they constitute a serious environmental problem. We look into this, and I mean, polluting water, it is heavy metals also in soil. It was mentioned one can use plants for phytoremediation in order to clean soil that has been polluted. The heavy metals also taken up by the crops, and there is a negative influence on the ecosystem. So heavy metals are nasty. We have worked, and this is work with students from many different countries, operating with sulfate-reducing bacteria. It means it takes sulfate, produces sulfide, precipitates the metals, and does it in a very, very efficient way. The microbes live on porous glass, So you can pass the water over and you produce a sulfide and you precipitate the metals. This is actually from Bolivia, one of the mining streams which is being treated. It contains a lot of heavy metals and it is really a difficult environment to work with. But freshwater, people think that freshwater, fine. But these are from Botswana, some signs. And what they say is algal bloom has made this area potentially unsafe. And it's actually not real algae, it is cyanobacteria. They produce a lot of nasty toxins. We had a student from Botswana who was interested in this. We established an analytical process. She could monitor very low concentrations using an immunoassay combined with a capacitive biosensor. So that sensor has a sensitivity that is fantastic. In the lab, we measure bacterial toxin down to 10 to minus 19 moles per liter. Those of you who are chemists, you realize this is sensitive. It's very sensitive. But then when you have this, you can monitor and then you can use separation systems to remove the toxins in order to get water for consumption. Collaboration with the private sector is something that I think is important. And I come back to Bolivia again. This is the wastewater from a mine. When we came there, we thought, would be fine, we can clean this water because this water floats down through the cultivation landscape into the Amazonas. The people in the mining industry, they were also interested to clean it, but not for that reason. They wanted water to feed whatever people they had working in the mine. So we had completely different angles to approach it. But and this you can see a lake of heavily polluted water, which is now under treatment. We have formulated kind of a strategy for building a strong biotech, industrial biotech research. We think that one needs certain competencies, enzyme technology, downstream process technology, anaerobic fermentation, microbial fermentation, and then some microbial technology, and cloning and molecular biology. You can add more things, but this gives quite a, if you have students being trained in this, you can have a very good functioning unit. And then you can add applications outside. So you have food, biotech, environmental chemistry, or medical biotech, depending on what the society needs. And we also try to have master students working in this pentagrams here, so we can have them working together with a PhD student. So when the PhD student is in Sweden, he or she can communicate with the master students to find out what's going on. And we link up with industrial partners in case there are industrialists. So you can then see that you can have some joint efforts between these two. So that means one can expand this into industrial applications from these research programs. And we have then realized that people need to understand how does the private sector function, one way or the other at least. So we have a course in entrepreneurship in biotechnology. We ask the students then, please make a market survey of the compound you are interested in. Write a business plan, and then we should look in how does one arrange financial support. If you have those three, of course you need also to think about intellectual property right, that means the patents. If you have those, and which is even more important, to meet other people who have done this journey and tell about their successes. But it's even more interesting to listen to those who failed, because they have a story to tell. So when I tell about I've started quite a number of companies, I can tell you many things about failures, but also some successes. So the course is important to discuss projects in areas that are familiar to students. It's important to have concrete objects to work with, and it gives the students a toolbox where they know a little more how to approach and to take things out in society. In Lund, when we started this, people were rather scared of starting companies. We have a list now, it has been expanded even more. Bioprocess Control is, well, I mentioned two of them further down here, but it deals with anaerobic digestion, capsules on biosensors. This is a consultancy in environment. This is fermentation, polymers, and this is a kind of consultancy company as well. But if we look at the Indiens, it works with a pilot scale biorefinery. One of the founders now tries to start the daughter company in India. So it means we transfer. Another founder also is now trying to establish activities in Ethiopia, which means that we have a transfer of competence. And Bioprocess Control, the CEO is from China and has started a daughter company there. So we transfer the knowledge and technology, but of course we also try to do business. So several of these companies are actually profitable, even if they are not making us rich. They at least give enough money so we have a return. But points to focus on postdoctoral training, I think, is very important. I mean, the PhD training is fine, but people need more, and the postdoctoral training, certainly. Industrial contacts is very important, but one needs to realize when doing that, one has to be visible. There are quite often, one establish a contact, sends out the master students, and 4 or 5 months after, people come and ask, well, how did it go with the student? You need to be present in order to establish a contact. But when the contact is established, then one can start to extract money. That is important. PhD program and postdoc programs, I think if they are not there, they should be introduced gradually. And when starting, I think collaborate with established companies. Many places people say, there are no companies really in this area. We had a workshop in in Zimbabwe. And we invited people to come. There came people from banks and a lot of different companies, no real biotech company. But one guy raised his hand and said, during all my years here, university has never ever approached me. Well, I said, well, sir, how many times have you approached university? 0. So one needs to start establishing the contacts. And I think one should start with less demanding projects. Consulting, troubleshooting, etc. is usually quite good. And this is just a picture of from our biorefinery with these 11.5 cubic meter tanks. So by that, thank you so much.